This is going to be our second video on AzEDS submission to ADM reports. So if you haven't seen the first part yet, it'll help to go backwards. My name is Saba, and I have with me Monica Baz. We'll be going through some Excel tips like Vlookups to get you through your student data and your potential thousands of errors a little bit faster than one at a time. We want to go through where you can find supporting materials, and then just generally what are Excel functions and arguments. Monica will show you how to use the formula wizard in Excel to really drive down and do the VLOOKUP in detail, and then I'll give you a little bit of homework about how to find more formulas and help you out better. So if you get to the School Finance webpage, you can find, hopefully this is where you found this video. If not, go there and get the handout so you can follow along. Essentially, Excel can do things for you, and you probably know a few different formulas already, right? If you get in a cell and you type equals, you can add two numbers together like this. But there are also more complex formulas that you could even call a function, and to use them you would give that formula, or you would give it a list of arguments. So the first half of the video will be based on the first half of the sheet, and you can already see that there are arguments and functions listed on it. The second half of the video will be how to find other formulas and other tips in Excel as well. Let's get going.
The formula that I'm going to go over briefly is using VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP compares columns within worksheets to find a same or similar value within the spreadsheet. In this case, for this tool, the unique value that we are going to be comparing is the state student ID or SACE number. So before we get started, I'm going to ask that you pull your Stud 10, the enrollment Stud 10, and your ADM 15. In the Wednesday workshops, we actually had an opportunity where we pulled the Stud 10 and ADM 15 as well as the Integ 15 report. But for this video, I'm simply going to compare the Stud 10 to the ADM 15 to identify students that have made it on the ADM 15 for payment, that have landed within AzEDS, but for whatever reason may or may not be landing on the ADM 15. So I want for you to go in and pull your reports from within the AD Connect AzEDS portal and generate these reports. Once you have generated those reports, I'm going to ask that you create one worksheet or workbook for all of the reports and format them as a table. I'll go over briefly what I mean when I say format as a table, and then we're going to add columns and start typing in. So this is what the VLOOKUP formula looks like. It's a 4-function argument formula. I'll go over the details of what exactly it is that I'm saying, and I'll walk you through exactly what you need. The good news is that this is exact screenshots from a fake Stud 10 that I've generated and a fake ADM 15. So if you're not catching what I'm saying on this video, you can simply go in and copy this information for yourself, and it should generate the same result. So let's go ahead and minimize this, and I will show you what I'm talking about. So on here I mentioned we're going to format your worksheets as a table. And so what I'm going to do is I've already put the Stud 10 and the ADM 15, you'll see here, on a workbook. So I have my Stud 10 of my fake data, and I have my ADM 15. I want to format the Stud 10 and the ADM 15 as a table so that simply when I put in a formula, it automatically carries down to each one of my rows effortlessly, and it also creates these lovely little filter buttons up here so that if I'm reconciling, I just have that option, and it's just easier to work with. So before we go to format as a table, I pulled up this the separate spreadsheet just to give you an example of how I'm doing that, since I've already done it for my stud 10 and ADM 15. So quickly, we'll go over formatting a table within Excel. So on your stud 10 and your ADM 15, I'm going to select A1. So the very top leftmost, very first cell within the worksheet. And I'm going to hit Control, Shift, and End on my keyboard. So that's Control, Shift, and End. And this will simply highlight all of the data, all of the cells that contain data within my worksheet. And what I'm going to do once all of this has been highlighted, I'm going to go home, and then I'm going to go to Format as a Table. And on here, I can select any color that I want. For the purposes of this video, I chose the blue one. And so it says, where is the data for your table? And since I've already highlighted and selected the field for which I want this data, I'm just going to simply hit OK. And you'll see here that the columns automatically become headers for each one of these columns. They become headers, and then it's colored in an easier way to read rather than just looking at a regular spreadsheet. So that's how I format my worksheet as a table. And so like I said, I've already done that for this video. So I have my stud 10 and I have my ADM 15. The stud 10 is very similar for those SACE coordinators that are used to using SACE. The stud 10, the enrollment stud 10, is very similar to what the SD ADM 72 that you were used to, in that it has the students that you've submitted from your SIS and have landed in AzEDS. What ADE has, a list of your students that you have. This is prior to integrity running on it. This is prior to ADM running on it. This is simply what has landed in ADE. It's important for me to know that, one, because I want to know that comparing to your SIS to what ADE has is important, but also comparing from what has landed to what has actually passed integrity and the students that I'm actually getting paid for. And so I'm going to compare the students that have landed versus students that I'm getting paid for. So what I'm going to do is a quick way to do that is using a formula like Vlookup. When I used to work at a charter, I literally used to be able to print out my SD-ADM 72, print out my 75-1, and then do a ruler side-by-side comparison. We're at a point for larger districts where we can't do that. So Vlookup is a super useful formula and tool. So now that I have my spreadsheet, I'm going to create a column. I'm going to actually insert a table column to the left. So I'm going to right click on column A1. I'm going to go down to the insert table column to the left. And it just brings up column 1 as a generic default. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in compare. This is how I'm going to compare my data. And so I'm going to click on A2, and I'm going to, this is where I'm going to put my formula. And since I formatted this worksheet as a table, I only need to put the formula in one time and it'll automatically drag down. So with the formulas, I'm going to go up to my tab of formulas here. And for the purposes of this video, I'm actually going to go to the formulas and use the formula wizard. If you are experienced enough, you can go in and actually type in equals Vlookup and it'll bring it up for you. But for the training purposes, I'm going to actually use the wizard. So again, go to the tab that has formulas, lookup and reference, and we're going to drag all the way down to the Vlookup. So the Vlookup, it's asking you, and you'll see on this little cheat sheet that I have you, is the value that you want to find, such as the unique value that you want to find and compare to from the stud 10 to the ADM 15. And for this video, for VLOOKUP, we want to make sure that we're looking at the state student ID. That's the one unique value that we can compare. So what I'm going to do is, what are we looking for? Well, I just said we're looking for the state student ID. So in this case, I'm going to click directly on this specific student's ID. The wizard for the function arguments within here will record anytime you click within the worksheets. So you notice that I clicked here on this student 31881934. Once I clicked there, the lookup value, it brought in the value for the header column. So it's saying lookup at state student ID. Cool. The table array is the range of cells that you would want to find. So I'm saying I want to find the state student ID on the ADM 15. So I'm going to go click over to my ADM 15. Let's get rid of you. And again, it records everything that I'm clicking on, and this hovers, the wizard follows me, it hovers over as I click over to different worksheets or workbooks. And I've clicked on ADM 15 down here, and it's recorded that. And so what I want to do is, now that I've clicked on the ADM 15, VLOOKUP looks at the leftmost column that you've selected. So since I'm looking to compare the state student ID, I want to find on the ADM 15 where the state student ID begins. And so for the ADM 15, it's on column L. So I want to hover over here just a minute, and you'll see that my cursor then becomes an arrow. So we want to get to that point where my cursor becomes an arrow. I'm going to left click like I normally would to copy within a worksheet. So I'm going to hover over so I become a little arrow, my cursor becomes an arrow, and I'm going to select and scroll all the way over with my finger still pushed on the mouse, and I'm going to select columns L through columns AH. Before I let go, you'll see that I have this little number changing, this value 22C, 20C, 21C, 22C, and then finally landing on 23C. The reason that I'm doing that is that on the stud 10, I want for this value within this 23rd row here to be returned on the stud 10. So I'm going to let go, and it's recorded that information. So I'm looking for a state student ID. I'm looking on the ADM 15 from columns L through H through AH. Well, this recorded since I selected ADM 15 twice. And I'm telling it that in the where I was telling you 21, 22, 23C, I want it to return the value from within the 23rd column within the ADM 15, which just so happened to have been the value, the ADM, limited ADM. And then the range lookup. The range lookup, you could either type in the word true or false. False will give you an exact match. True will give you a close enough match. So what I want for you to do is type in the word false, because I want to exactly bring up the state student ID. So let's get rid of that guy. I'm going to type in the word false. And then I'm simply going to hit OK. And you will see here what it's done is it's giving me a value. This value of 0.5 for this student, this 0.5 is the limited ADM for this student, number, or Deanna, last name 106, very original. That's the ADM value that's on here. So these students that have an NA are students that are showing, and this is concerning for this fake Montessori school, these students that have an NA the value that's returned is because they are not on the ADM 15. So as you can imagine, working at a school, if they've landed in AzEDS but you're not getting paid for them, that is concerning. So from a reconciliation standpoint, these are the students that I would want to look at first. So like for this student, this Sherry last name 107, I have a value of a 1.0 ADM. So I know that I'm getting paid for that student, most likely because she's passed integrity. These students, at this point, then I would be able to identify that they're probably on my intake 15 report or something has gone askew. Here is the filter. So if you just click on the little triangle to filter, you can select all and then simply click on those students that have an NA so that you can go through and identify quickly the students that you need to look at in your SIS or on the intake 15 to identify those students that you need to pay attention to first. So that is quickly a VLOOKUP. Here is the actual formula. So like I said, you could either use the lookup wizard that I used if you choose, or you can simply type this exact formula, put equals VLOOKUP, and make sure that you have the parentheses just like I do. You can also capture that on the cheat sheet. It should give you the same result because I didn't change any of the columns on the stud 10 or the ADM 15. So you can use this to then verify and reconcile. You can also use this, this very formula to reconcile your stud 10 against an extract from within your SIS. So if you can extract your student information via using a SACE number and the list of student names, you can certainly reconcile between your stud 10 and an extract from within your SIS. So super useful formula. On here on the cheat sheet, Saba sent home some homework for the attendees that were able to attend our school Wednesday workshops. So these are also additional formulas that you may want to reach out to somebody if you don't already know how to use these formulas. Reach out to somebody to try to teach you these. But this is a VLOOKUP. This is what I used to use in my experience working at a school. And this is how I used to reconcile student data.
So Monica left off getting you to look at ADM on a stud 10. I don't actually have access to what ASIS does, so I'm going to fake it with just a list of students, their student IDs and membership type. And first I'm going to do what Monica did already. So you can watch me, let me zoom in for a minute. There we go. So you can watch me first make the header wide enough to see. So Monica did, how much ADM did this student generate? Right, so I took what Monica did and turned it into a question. And then you can do the same thing. VLOOKUP. So if you look, Monica went through I call it the formula wizard, right? Where you chose a formula and it gave you a window and it held your hand and walked you through it. If you notice what I did, I just started typing. So if you've used, obviously every computer has its own word processor. There's 6 different browsers available. There's 100 ways to skin a cat, if that's the colloquialism for it. So you can type the formulas just straight away. So here I started to type it. As I get closer to the end of the actual function name, I get a little suggestion under my mouse. It says, VLOOKUP looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table and returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. By default, the table must be sorted in ascending order. So there's a lot of hints given right away. The second I open parentheses to start entering arguments, it gives me a list of specific arguments that it wants. So the lookup value is the state student ID. The table array Monica just did over on the ADM, and it was 23 columns wide. There we are, 23 columns. I'm going to slow down for 1 second. Oh, clearly my computer is behind a little bit. But if you look just to the right and above my cursor over here, there's a little box that's popped up. It says 23C. That's how many columns I've selected. AH has to be something like the 34th column. But because I started at L, it's already subtracted A through K, and it's given me this is 23 columns, right? So AG would have been 22. So if you can see that little box jumping back and forth. I need to remember the number 23 because that's the next thing that goes in this formula, right? So table array was from the student ID all the way to limited ADM. And column index number, we got that hint just now from my cursor. And then the little helper below gives me a hint. The next argument necessary is range lookup. Monica typed the word true, but false is possible, or Monica typed the word false, but ones and zeros for a computer mean exactly the same thing, and I occasionally type fastly, so instead of misspelling a word, I just use the zero, but it should have exactly the same, there you go, exactly the same result, but using, typing it in the bar instead of using the wizard. So Monica and I came on these skills based on having to do the job in charter schools and trying to reconcile student data. It takes a few years of practice before you learn which way works for you, right? So, for example, if I wanted to make the text in this box bold, I could either go up here and hit the B, or I could hit Control B, or I could highlight some of the text and then make it bold, right? There's more than one way to skin a cat. So that's so what I would want to do next, just personally, is I'm trying to get these thousands of kids. I don't understand why there's so many kids who aren't generating ADM. I want to start to describe what happened, try to figure out what's going on. So we're getting to the homework part now. So the next thing I want to know is, okay, fine. This many kids are generating ADM. How many of them didn't pass integrity? Or how many of them showed up on the integrity report multiple times? Or how many of them didn't even make it to a stud 10? Okay, so did this student land in AzEDS? So this will be the same thing, equals Vlookup the student, and my range this time would be the stud 10. I have to go to the student ID. I might as well just take the same row. One column, but absolute match. Oh, wow. Not surprisingly, because I'm working here in ADE, I only have access to the kids that you've submitted, so our fake data has 100% kids that made it to a stud 10 because I took their student IDs from the stud 10. But if there were some that hadn't made it, when I scroll down to the bottom, there would be some that are marked blank and some that are marked not applicable, the way that it did in the ADM column, right? So there's some that are not applicable because it wasn't found on the other sheet. So in that case, I want to know how many rows on the integ 15 right? Each row on an integ 15 is either an error or one of the sets of rules that went by. And when we pulled integ 15, I'm pretty sure we got the passes and the fails. There they are. Here, if you see, there's P, F, but every kid is on there more than, or some of the kids are on there more than once. Oh, sorry, I forgot. We doctored the data set. These aren't the kids' real names, so just pay attention to the student ID. So this kid has 3 rows on here. So when I go to my fake list, I would do equals count if, and then it says, oh, wait, back one. Count if counts the number of cells within a range that meet a given condition. But if you see, it also suggests there's a second formula. So if I type the S, it says COUNTIFs counts the number of cells specified by a given set of conditions. So you can either do check one thing, look inside this box and get all of the garments that are socks, or you can check for two things. Look inside this box, get all the garments that are socks that are made of wool. All right, so there's two conditions to check against. Theoretically, you could go infinitely using COUNTIFs. Look inside this box, count all the garments that are socks, that are made of wool, that are blue. So you can specify a lot of things if you use COUNTIFs. So COUNTIF is what I'm going to do this time. The range and criteria. So the range is going to be on integ 15. I just want to know if you made it. And then check if this kid is there. Interesting. I wonder if there are any correlations. The kids who made it versus the kids who didn't. So the kids who have ADM have about 3 rows on an integ 15. The kids that don't have ADM have about 6 rows. My best hypothesis right now is those 3 extra rows might be the failures. So, how many times did this student fail an integrity rule? It may seem a little patronizing that I'm spelling out the words so carefully when I ask these questions, how many times? It's because computers and humans are a little bit differently. If I turn to a human and I say, go look in the drawer and get me all of the blue woolen socks, I can be very clear by combining all these statements together. With a computer, I have to break everything out and be very explicit. Get garments from the drawer that are socks, get things that have the color blue, get things that are made of wool. So I have to be very explicit with a computer. So the act of writing this sentence out so clearly, how many times did this student fail an integrity rule, it helps teach me, the user, exactly what I want. So sometimes you can misstate what you want and then be surprised. So with this one, I know that I want to check the integrity sheet, and I want to check for student ID, and I want to check for the word fail. So I know that this one is going to need to be a COUNTIFs formula. Let's see, COUNTIFs, go onto the integrity sheet, the student IDs, then to jump back and forth between sheets, I find it easiest to just step up into the bar and type again, comma, because it's commas to separate the arguments, student ID, comma. Now if you see right below where I'm working, the formula, I call it little helper, has told me that now here's going to be a block for the second set of arguments, because you can if against multiple conditions. So the second set of condition, I need to go get a range. That'll be this. And for this one, I know it's fail, so it's going to be very clearly all of the fails. Oh, so interesting. So the students that are generating ADM didn't fail integrity rules. So let me flip this around. Who did the most? Well, there you go. The students who are failing a lot of rules, they're the ones who don't have ADM. I think my next step from here would be something like seeing if there is a certain number of times a specific rule is failing, see if there's an easy thing that I can do to get all of them, or count them. As I'm scrolling down, there's kind of a break here. About 45 of the kids are failing one rule more than the others, so there might be some hints as to what I can do to clear up more data faster. Which effort I can take first will get me to the end quicker, but the way that I learned to use this many formulas is to take a note of exactly what I'm trying to do and then ask. At the time, there was a little paperclip that was up in the top of Excel and Word and everything, and you would click on the paperclip and ask it a question. For you, you'd probably do the same thing in some kind of a browser or search website. Essentially, if I'm using Excel, can I get half of the student ID? Can I add a student ID to another field and make a new idea out of it. There's a lot of things you could ask. Basically, I think the internet is full of people who are just trying to get better skills in their jobs, and you'll find a lot of trainings out there for other questions that you have. But this practice of figuring out what you need and being very clear, just a little bit of research. So here's the homework part. I'm so sorry. That said, if there's something that we can help you with, feel free to email your account analyst and follow our website if you. Here you go. We've got a training section on here on our website, and then you can always join us in our webinars and there you go, on our webinars and our Wednesday workshops. So subscribe to our page, come and see. We'll try and help you as much as we can.